Welcome back to another episode of the Trauma Queen podcast. Today I have Kristi McVee here with me. Thank you so much for coming on, Kristi.
Oh, you're welcome. I love the name of the podcast.
Pardon, you love the name? Yeah, it was suggested actually by a friend of mine. She's like, everyone calls you the Trauma Queen. I think you should just own it and that should be the name of your podcast. I was like, I actually love that. So I'm going to dive right in. I'm a very direct, very straight into it sort of person, and all my episodes run that way. And there's no fluffing around. I just want to know straight up, what led you to your work as a child abuse educator? What past history, past work experience, what led you here?
Yeah, so quite interestingly, probably not the same as a lot of child abuse prevention educators. I don't have a remembered history with child sexual abuse, but I became a police officer at the age of 28, and I had a 2-year-old daughter at the time. Joining the police, I was considered a mature-aged police officer at the ripe old age of 28, because most police officers join at 18, 19. It's quite funny because I didn't have the same pathway that they did. I worked in administration. I had a really big, non-policing history. I didn't even want to be a police officer growing up. Like, I had no ambition there. But I saw an ad in the paper that said, we want women police officers, we want you, kind of thing, flexible working arrangements. And it was an idea that got stuck in my mind. My daughter was only 9 months old at the time. And then, and I thought, I could do that. So I went off and I became a police officer at 18 months or close to 18 months later. And by the time I graduated from the academy, she was 2.5. But within the first week of coming out of the police academy, I saw my first child abuse case as a first responder to an incident. And from then I was pretty much, being a female police officer and also being a mum, being a empathetic person, I tended to get all of the sexual assault cases or the child abuse cases just to help with detectives and stuff like that. So about a year into my career, I got the whole station where I was working got asked who would like to become a specialist child interviewer, and I put my hand up. And I hadn't even really graduated, so to speak. I was still a probationary constable, still learning the job in all its entirety, but I put my hand up, and my daughter was 3 when I went off to that training and learned all about child sexual abuse and how to interview children to get their evidence for court. And when I had that training, I thought I knew what I knew, but I knew nothing. And it was quite confronting, quite scary. And I did that for nearly 9 years of my career, interviewing kids about their abuse. And then within the 4 years of joining the police, I actually then went, no, I want to be a detective. I want to investigate this stuff. So I again put my hand up, was interviewed, got into the detective school and became a detective within the first 5 years of my career in the police, and did that for nearly 6 years till I left. I left the police in 2020, right just before COVID, but I left with PTSD because of the vicarious trauma from hearing all of the stories and all of the things that I learned whilst I was in the police. But you would think that I wouldn't want anything to do with child sexual abuse leaving the police. And at first I thought I would become a personal trainer, and I learnt to become a personal trainer. I thought that was going to be my new career move. But before leaving and as I left, I just kept thinking, if parents knew what I knew, they might just do things differently. I had parents who had this new reality to deal with, finding out that their child had been sexually abused and trying to navigate that, say to me all the time, I just didn't know what to watch out for. I didn't know what to watch out for. So I started writing some of that stuff down and thinking, maybe I should have a podcast. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that. But whilst going through and healing PTSD, I just was writing what I was thinking and feeling. Over a 2-year period, it became a book that's called Operation Kid Safe. I self-published and released that in August of 2022. And from that point forward, I was just talking about it. I mean, I did start talking about it on social media before the book was released, but from that point forward, it was about talking about what I wrote in the book and talking about what I found out and just educating parents on what I knew. So here I am 5 years outside of the police and still talking about it, still as passionate as I was the day I left about protecting kids and educating parents about what to find, what to do, what to know, and how to keep their kids safe.
It's like you were really meant to do that. It sounds similar to me in that like you get pulled in different paths and you think, oh, this would be nice. And then all of a sudden you're like, how did I end up back here? Off the back of what you said, what are the signs? What are the signs that a child's being abused? It's probably a question that people ask you all the time, but the common signs and the uncommon signs.
I mean, look, common signs are obviously children saying things like they don't want to go to someone's house, or they don't want to be around a certain person, which we're not very good at listening to kids, right? We tend to just dismiss how they feel. And they often will have headaches or stomach aches, or they don't want to go somewhere, and those signs are there for a reason, and we should investigate, or we should find out the why, right? But the other uncommon signs, some of the red flags I saw was especially when the abuser was someone known to the child inside their home, and we know that over 90% of child sexual abuse is by someone known to the child, whether it be a family member or a friend or a friend of the family or a relative, whatever. But when it's someone in the home, it can be sometimes even harder to see, because that person's, deflecting and manipulating and, grooming everyone around them to believe that they're not doing it, nothing to see here kind of thing. It's like a magic trick. For me, a lot of the cases I saw, the person was, heavily manipulating the other parent or the other person in the home. That person was being guided to leave that child or children with that person all the time. One of the cases is popping up in my mind right now where this abuser would hey, leave them with me, I'll babysit them. And then the children had changed clothes when they came home. Often there was a change of clothes, or they were all in the shower together. And this person the parent that they was going outside of the home was just going down the shops. There was no need for a shower in the middle of the day kind of thing. And then things like children displaying harmful sexualized behaviors or sexualized behaviors above and beyond what is normal for a child of their age. It's not normal for children of 3, 4 or 5 to display signs to mimic sexual sounds, sexual moves, to ask people to do things to their private parts. It's not normal for those things. And those are some of the just signs that in this case I'm thinking of were happening. But without education, and with that other person constantly saying, oh, you just, that's normal for kids, or that's, you're seeing things, or gaslighting them into believing that they're making it up, or they're seeing more than what's happening. So they can be very, very easy for someone who you love and trust, to break that love and trust by doing that. And then some of the other signs, pornography has a big part to play in this, in that a lot of the offenders that I investigated and charged, they had massive pornography addiction. And so when someone's staying up late at night and looking and not letting you see their device, or they're looking at, they could be up all night looking at porn, which is fueling this idea that they can do whatever they want to anyone in the home. So there's just some of the quick ones, but I do talk about this on social media, and lots of red flags. Those parents, or not even parents, those relatives that expect a child to kiss and hug them, it might be just normal for that family, but then someone who pushes that to the point that the child has to do it every time, or they're always constantly touching the child and not respecting the child's boundaries, or you find them behind closed doors. I don't think any adult should ever be behind a closed door with a child. There's no need to close doors in safe homes.
Yeah, absolutely. The pornography one is a really big one as well. I remember recovering my own abuse and talking to my mum and things like that, and trying to say to her, did you know? Was there signs? How did you not know? And I remember my mum saying, oh, he was really addicted to porn. It was before the internet. So she was like, he had magazines everywhere, in the toilet, in his work truck. There was stacks in and he was always watching it. And once I started researching, I realized that is actually one of those signs of a predator, being highly sexual and addicted to pornography.
Porn addiction's kind of not been normalized, but it has, in a way, in this current society, with the fact that porn is so accessible now. In back when you were a child, it wasn't as accessible, so they did have to get those. They had to use their imagination, right? And today they don't have to use their imagination, because it's all on the internet, and they can do whatever they want, or look up whatever they want, and it's being fueled by they're fueling it, in my opinion. So it's not. I think a lot of people go, well, porns can be healthy in a healthy relationship, but it's also unhealthy in an unhealthy relationship. And so one of the things that I noticed with all of these offenders is that they had lots of photos of children in different states, you know, semi-nude and nude. They had lots of videos of children or just taken off social media. They also had lots of porn and violent pornography, you know, going into bestiality, etc. And we know there's some research that shows that people who are attracted to children actually have a higher rate of paying for pornography and looking at violent pornography because it feeds into that fantasy. So I didn't know this when I first started investigating these cases, but we know this now. But I saw a pattern back then, saw the pattern, and I constantly was like, why don't people speak up about this? Why aren't we talking about this? So that's where I'm a great observer of people, of behaviour. I don't know why. Maybe it's a trauma response from my childhood. Who knows? I think a lot of survivors and lived experience survivors can relate. You notice things before other people do sometimes, and sometimes we're really good at listening to it. Sometimes we ignore it because we think it's just our trauma. But yeah, it's really important to listen to your gut and not to just. I always think let's look at why. Why are people doing what they're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you mentioned a little while ago, pricked my brain for a question that I have for you, which is, as you know, myself and my mum and my sister have written the book Secret or Surprise, which I actually posted to you today. So that's coming for you.
Can't wait to get it.
I'm one of those people that I need to have all the solutions. I don't want to just write the book because it's like, okay, mums get the book. We've already sold hundreds of copies. Mums get the book. They read it to their children. A percentage of children potentially are going to go, oh, that happens to me. Oh, and they're going to come forward. Now, this has already happened with someone that I know in the local community, and a child's come forward and said, I'm being sexually abused. And the mum has then gone, okay, who is it? And the child's kind of been really wishy-washy about, like, I don't remember. And basically the mum's gone down to the police station and she's been told that without the children sort of coming forward, making a statement, that they can't do anything about it. Now, I have reason to believe, very strong reason to believe, that it's their father. And I know that this is going to be the case with so many people because of my history, because of, as you mentioned, 90%, it's happening. It's out there. Fathers sexually abusing their daughters is very common. Now, the issue that I have is that when I think back to my childhood, I think there's no way that I would go into a police station as a child and make a statement against somebody that I love. I would be terrified. So I wanted to just actually understand, for those mums that might read the book and then go, okay, my child's come forward, what is the process that they would need to go through if their child comes forward with abuse for them to prosecute? What does the child need to make a statement? Do they need to go to court? Do they need to stand up in court? What's that going to look like for that family going forward?
Yeah, good question. So I guess if we look at it from the perspective of what I did as interviewing children, so in most cases, if a parent comes forward and says, my child is disclosed like this mum has, they obviously need to know who it is. They can't go anywhere and investigate anything without that. So without that, and let's preface this with, is in most cases when it goes to police, you only get one real shot at getting that child's evidence. Yeah. We don't get to re-interview them over and over and over again because it gets pulled apart in the defence, by the defence in court. We only get really one shot to get it right.
Wow.
And that is the hardest part, because a lot of children aren't prepared for when they go in there. They don't know what they're going in for. They don't actually understand, especially when they're little. They don't understand what's going on. And this is the flaw. This is one of the flaws in the system, is that you get one shot. Now and again you'll get a second go if something else has come up or if something else has happened, but you really, really do only get one real good go. A child doesn't disclose in that interview. Sometimes it means that they won't ever disclose to anyone until they're an adult. And it's just really flawed. So from a perspective of, as a parent, say if my child came to me and said, hey mum, I've got something to tell you, someone has done this to me, I'd want to make sure that that child was prepared for what's going on. I mean, obviously if it's someone close to them and it's in the home, so there's so many factors to this question.
Okay, so specifically, if it's a parent, like not necessarily even in the home, but a divorce
Like a
situation as well,
separated family, yeah.
shared custody or in the home. Like if it's a parent, how could you like? I think this was another question, but like, how could you get that? How can you get that statement from that child?
Well, here's the other really difficult, and I'm afraid I'm not. I can tell you what the process is, but I'm not going to be able to give you the right, like a full answer here, because the other part to this is that if a parent prepares their child too much before they go in to speak to police, that can be used against the parent, as in that they have.
It's a lose-lose. Yeah, I know.
I know, and they can be. It can be then used against the protective parent, the non-abusing parent, as in they have, prepared them for it, and they've coached them into giving that evidence, and that is really dangerous, because that then opens it up to the family court then giving full custody to the abusing parent, so or like shared custody or some sort of custody and it's already happening. We're seeing this every day in the family court system, where an abusing parent makes the claim that, oh, they're making it up, they're vexatious, they're just angry about the breakup, and then again, let's think about what these people are. They're masterful manipulators of children and everyone around them. So it's really easy for them to do that, because they've already done the work to make you look like you're a bad parent, you're a bad person, you're just angry that even if they're the ones who left you first. So it's a really, it's like a tripwire, and there's bombs going off everywhere.
It keeps me up at night, because I think even if you can get the child to the point of feeling comfortable enough to make the statement, feeling safe enough to make the statement, feeling a level of getting them to understand that the responsibility and the guilt isn't on them, and that the parent shouldn't be doing what they're doing, and understanding that the parent might go to jail for what they've done, that's a lot for a child to comprehend, full stop. And then for them to actually then make the choice to go and make the statement, to have one shot to get it right, but also to have a parent that's definitely going to fight back, especially if there is a divorce in play and it was a nasty divorce, things like that. Like, I just can't understand like what mums can do, and dads, but mostly mums. Like, I think what can parents do, mums in this situation specifically, to ensure that they can protect their child, that they can get that conviction, and even the protection layer, because I know that, like, you said, like the one parent will place the other parent as a bad parent. My dad did exactly that to my mum, and exactly that to me, to the point where I truly believed that my mum was weak and helpless, and that even if I went to her, there's no way she could protect me. So there's like all of those psychological layers going on as well, that as a child you have to calculate. So like, even to get to that point of them. So, is this the same thing? If a parent was to does the child have to actually go into the station and make a statement? Was one of my questions. Yeah.
Okay. So what used to happen, and it does happen in a lot of places, but not everywhere. Yes, sometimes they do have to go into a police station and give a statement. The ideal situation is that they don't. They go into a neutral place set up specifically for child interviews, but not every place has that facility. For instance, in West Australia, we have centres that are specifically designed for child interviewing, where they go in, it's like this beautiful, colourful room, and there's all of these toys and stuff for the kids to play with and watch TV and hang out, and then they're shown where they'll do the interview, and you take them in there and you show them this interview room where there's a camera. This is the camera. This is where someone will sit and make sure that we don't miss anything, and then it's going to be me and you across the talking. It's just going to be us, and then you can have a break when you want, and we're explaining this as we go to the child so that they get comfortable, and when they're ready, they come in and hopefully they say everything that they need to say. There's no pressure though. We can't force children, or we can't make them say what we want them to say, because then it's not given willingly, and it just gets thrown out in court, and we get argued out, and these people get away with it. So if it's not done carefully, it can be very like we've just discussed, it can be a big issue. In Australia, the conviction rate of at trial, child sex offences at trial is 0.03%, less than 1% at trial for guilty. So, the reason for that is because the burden of proof has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, and we have to prove it. So, in the right facilities, yes, you're going to have a specific child-safe, child-friendly place, but I've done it in police stations, in interview rooms where I interview offenders. So, children are very resilient. One of the things that probably kept me from going mental was the fact that kids are so resilient, and they are so amazingly resilient. They are. If this is their normal, they're not. It shouldn't be their normal, never should have been their normal, but they can be so amazingly resilient, and they are just so easy they're so much easier than adults to deal with, and they deserve all of the respect and love and care that they can get. But one of the cool things about this is that, once they've done an interview, if it didn't work out, and they do have something to say, sometimes they're even braver the next time. Maybe they'll come back and they'll say, this and this happened, and they know what to expect. The hard thing is that if they don't have someone on their side, like that empowered parent, that has spoken this belief and love into them and told them that they can tell anyone, even though I was a police officer and I could say, hey, you can tell me anything. If they don't have the courage, it's not the courage, because they've got heaps of courage. If they didn't feel safe, it's not about courage, it's about safety. And if children don't feel safe, if they know that tomorrow they've got to go back into the care of the abuser, or this afternoon, and I've done interviews in schools, and if they know they're going home to be abused, then they're not going to say anything, because they don't know that saying something right now will protect them. So so it's
response, and that's the thing as well. Like, is there any protection? Is there any immediate protection if a child's to come forward? Because this is another thing I'm thinking for mums is like, if a child's coming forward about, say, a father in a nasty divorce and it's shared custody and it's legally that they need to be going to that father's, if that mother comes forward and the child makes a statement, is there some way that child can be protected from having to go back? Yeah.
Correct, yeah. So, look, I've been in cases where it's Thursday afternoon, the child's going to dad on Friday afternoon, and so it's considered a high priority, because we don't want them to go back into that parent's care if there's an alleged offence, right? So it's like all action stations, get that kid in. If the child says this is what's happening and gives us a detailed disclosure, then it's immediate orders, working with child protection or whatever the department is in your state, to get access blocked for that child. And then, because obviously we have to have the investigative process, if the child alleged that there was some recording of something, or there's this or whatever they've said in their interview, then there would be warrants issued. There would be you'd be going straight into that person's house to be able to obviously block any further evidence being destroyed. But if there was no, if they just told you something, it might take a little longer. And unfortunately, with these cases, it's a prioritized, which ones are the highest priority, which ones are at most at risk. If the child doesn't go back into that person's care or custody for weeks, then it might be a while before that person's pulled in to be interviewed, and then goes from there. If they're charged with something, then we've got protective bail, which goes over and above any child or family court should. Family court is null and void when there's bail and protective bail conditions. But family court goes above a violence restraining order, unless the violence restraining order is for the child as well. So there's levels of protection that we can build, but it has to be, there has to be an alleged offence, there has to be a disclosure, there has to be all of these things happening. So look, I wouldn't say don't go to police, because it's your right. It's actually there is some legislation now that if you are aware of an offence, especially in a sexual offence against a child, you have to report it. But if I was a newborn parent today, hearing this podcast, what I would be saying to you is that please ensure that you don't leave them unsupervised with people, and you teach them body safety and empower them from the very get-go, so that none of these people, even the people that are closest to them, can't take that away from them, and secrets versus surprises.
I think that's the thing as well. I probably didn't know, because it happened from as early as I can remember.
I mean, you probably didn't know too.
No, my mum didn't know it, but it took me a long time to realise how wrong it was. And I think if there had been a book like the book that we've written, I would have realised much earlier, oh, this is actually wrong. This is actually, like, I had a conversation with my kids the other day, and my kids are to the point where they're like, oh my God, Mum, you're so many times. And my son said to me, like, you've said this 1,000,000 times, and, you know, why is it so important? He's 9.
So have you told him why?
So I said to him, he doesn't know my history, but I've said to him, because it's illegal, because it happens, and it's actually more common than what people think, and it's illegal. It's against the law. If someone actually did that to you, that's against the law. And he's like, oh, what, really? Like, I hadn't had that next level of conversation. It was just like, people shouldn't do this. This is what's right. This is not what's not right. And he knows that, but he didn't really know the extent of how serious it was. Yeah. And when you haven't experienced it, you don't know the extent of how serious it is and how terrifying it is because you haven't experienced it. So you don't really understand why it's such a big deal because it hasn't happened to you. So it's a bit of that. It's kind of a good thing when they're responding sort of with this, like, you know, like,
yeah, it is, but we don't want them also. I mean, it's a very difficult, and I've been there, right? Like, I used to come home from like days where I'd had talked to kids who had had horrendous things happen to them, and it made me like hug my daughter harder, squeeze her more, and then like double down on the body safety.
Yeah.
And but you know, at his age, next year he's going to have, you know, puberty education and be talking about sex at 10, you know. And so for me personally, I would be, I mean, it's a choice, it's a personal choice always, but I would be like, this has happened and this is why, and this is, you know, and, you know, it's okay because I know better now. Like, you know, you don't even have to use your own experience. You can use other people's experiences, you know. And that's how my daughter learnt about a lot of things, like, oh, I saw this on the radio, I heard this on the news, or this is what I saw at work today, and this is what, you know, and just making it real instead of just this theoretical idea that we need to protect our kids.
I think that's where I've started moving into is and they're like a bit more like, oh, because they're 9 and 7, so like they're kind of getting to out of the more basics and into a bit more depth.
Yeah.
So just quickly touching back, so I know that like in Victoria we have, I think it's Socket. Is there like departments in each of the states that, because I know that there's departments that are better to handle these situations, they're trained, they specialize versus going to your local police station. Is that correct? Is it better for people to reach out to those departments, and like what are the sort of names of those departments that people could find to, you know, to access that?
I mean, I know that in Western Australia, like it's the Child Abuse Squad, or we've got the Parkerville Centres, you've got the Socket in Victoria, or the Child Protection Unit in, I think Queensland might be CIPU, Child Investigation Protection Unit, something like that. You know, so those are the better options. But if you're in regional Australia, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you're going to just have to trust your detective's office, your closest detective's office, which sometimes comes at a risk because they might not have the adequate training.
I'd be driving overnight all day. Like, I think to get to the right place, considering how you get one shot and how important it is, and how, like, I think to protect them and to give them that best chance of,
I think that's not bad advice, to be honest, but at the same time, like when I was learning about, when I became a specialist child interviewer, we were 1,600 kilometres from the city, and so I was, you know, we were in a rural, like in the middle of nowhere, so, you know, I was specialist trained in order to be there for those children. So if you can wait it out to see the right people, yes, definitely do it. But if it's urgent, then, you know, just ask the question, hey, what is the process? Because here's the thing, a lot of people don't think that they can ask questions of police. They just think they have to trust what's happening. And I in my book, I did actually write at the back of my book, I wrote what to do if. And these are the steps of an investigation. This is when to raise flags with your police officer if they don't tell you about what's happening next, or if they don't share this information. And this is what, you know, what to expect. And these are the steps to take. So, you know, it's not, I mean, it's a generalized rundown, but it is free on my if you join my mailing list, you get it for free, because I want everyone to have that information, because I realized when I left the police, people actually don't have a lot of knowledge around what to expect with policing, and police can sometimes really not tell people what they're doing. So
yeah,
it's your right to know where you're at, what's happening. Sadly, and for anyone listening, during a specialist child interview, you're not allowed to be in there. And that's the reason for that is because of the Evidence Act. And so your 3-year-old or 7-year-old might have to sit in with the interviewer. If they've done their job right, that child will feel safe to be in that room with that person. If they haven't done it right or they're not ready, it might not be the right moment. Be when you advocate for your child and say, hey, I know that you really want to do this today, but they aren't feeling, I can tell that they're not feeling comfortable. Let's not push this right now. Can I come back tomorrow? Or can I come back in a couple of days if it's not an urgent case, Yeah. The times that it's been urgent is that they're going straight into their care, and we know that there's possible abuse going to happen on the weekend. I've been on, interviewed children who've been witnesses to murders, and we don't want them to forget what they've seen. We want to get that evidence straight away. So those are urgent cases. Whereas if we've got a little bit of time, and you think, I don't know, my kid's not looking really confident here, I don't want to force it. Like I said, I think this is where police need to be more transparent. But again, they've just got their blinkers on and they're just thinking, let's get this done. So sometimes they don't actually pay attention to how everything's fitting. And also, I guess, sometimes we come across as overprotective parents, and if an interviewer is really good, they're going to pick up on whether you're interfering, so to speak, or whether you're just So when you do speak to police officers, don't come at it like you don't know my child and blah, blah, blah. You come at it from a place of, hey, do you think actually that maybe tomorrow would be a better day now that they've seen where we're going to be and what's going on? Because I'm really worried that they're not going to say anything because, it's all new to them. Or, you do have a right, they might not listen to it, but you do have a right to question, is right now the right time?
Yeah.
And I have had children who've come in and haven't and this is the thing, this is the difference. It should be led by the child. So, they've got to come in, sit down and tell me the worst thing that's ever happened to them. What's happened, what's gone where, and I have to know that in detail, what parts have gone in what places, all of the things. So, it should be led by the child and on what they want to do. And if they're not ready, I have turned them around and said, hey, do you want to try this again in another day? Let's try and find another day when you...
Yeah. Just obviously there's no work around that, no way to work around it, no way to fix it. But I just feel this fire inside of me, because I just think that conviction rate, or that rate of of cases, and that 0.03% plus the fact that there's so many children that just wouldn't even set foot in it just makes me feel like it's so easy for people to get away with it. It just blows my mind how easy it is for somebody to get away with that, and why it's just getting worse and worse, because there's just almost no solution to how to fix that, which kind of brings me, unless you have something to say on that, but it's making me so frustrated, because I think, you want to protect your child, but then, you can cut that person out of their life, and you can send them to therapy and things like that, and that is going to help them, and that's going to help them to heal and know that they're safe and etc. But I think that there's always that level of fear, and it depends on the situation, obviously. So my situation is that I was threatened to be killed, I was suffocated, I was tortured into absolute terror. So for me, knowing that he would be out there still would just not, I would think that he would find me no matter what, even if my mum had have tried to keep me safe, we moved away, I would have been he'll know, he'll find me, he'll get to me. So there's different levels, obviously, of fear. But I just feel like it's so hard for children to heal if nothing happens to that person, or I can't think of a solution. And this is why we donate to Grace Tame Foundation, because they're always looking at these laws and things like that. And I'm that's their domain, but it's just banging your head against a wall, hearing all those obstacles to actually protecting them.
Yeah, and I mean, you're more passionate about it because of what you've been through, and I'm passionate about because of what I've seen and heard, and I know that I don't know what the solution is yet, but you know, the one thing I do know is that we don't believe kids enough. One of the, you know, you ask the question, what happens when it goes to court and stuff, and do they have to stand up in front of their perpetrator? No, they don't. The interview is used as their evidence in chief. So when they go through the court, they don't have to stand up in court, but they are still cross-examined by the defence in a
But they weren't.
Well, in some states still they do. You know, they never used. They used to be. I think it might have been. I think it might have been banned. You might be right, but I don't know if it's state by state case.
Yeah.
You know, I know that some children are still questioned by a defence. I probably should check my facts, but you know, even still, that's traumatizing, right?
That's one of the, I think for me, like the statistics as an adult, knowing what, like the chance of a historic case was even smaller. Plus, it's...
And people aren't believed, children aren't believed, you know, and they used to have, and it's apparently not said anymore, but they used to have this warning, this judicial warning that judges had to give before a child abuse trial that said children are unreliable witnesses, and therefore without further substantiation or corroboration, you shouldn't trust that evidence on its own. So, you know, and here's the thing. Child sexual abuse is hidden. It's not. If it was out in front of everyone, we would stop telling kids that they're lying and that they're making it up, or that they couldn't have got it right. If it was out in front of everyone, we wouldn't have the issues we have. They would be sentenced. They would be gone. They wouldn't be out again. But no, it happens behind closed doors. And you know, the average length of time between first abuse and you know, first disclosure is around 24 to 30 years. 24 for females, 30 years for males. 99% of men never tell anyone, and you know, we know that 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will be sexually abused. So we've got so many people who can stand hand on heart and say it's happened to me, but we still don't believe victims.
Yeah, that's a whole problem in itself. I think somewhere that I would love to like discuss with you, something that has really resonated with me, again trying to figure out the solution, because when you go down one rabbit hole, it's really a bit of a dead end, and court and legal process is that dead end. So the other thing is, in an Australian study that you shared that I ended up downloading and deep diving into, it said that 1 in 6 Australian men have sexual thoughts about children. And this was alarming, but it also said that a large portion of them, if offered help, would want to do something about this. And when I think about that situation, when I think about the mind of an abuser, when I think about the level of shame that they feel around what they've done, yes, sometimes they really don't seem like they have any shame. And I've seen a lot of videos about the way that they're talking with other predators and things like that. But I know that for most, there is that level of shame, and there is this level of disgust towards themselves, and they know that what they're doing is wrong. Some of them would have like personality disorders and things like that, where they're, you know, splitting off parts, all sorts of things. Where could that man go? Do you know of resources where that man could go for anonymous therapy? Because I don't know many men that would show up to a circle and say, you know, like Alcoholics Anonymous, and say, hi, I'm Joe and I think about touching children, or I do what's that service? But also with mandatory reporting and things like that, if you're a father and you're thinking that and you're wanting to stop those thoughts, but you're telling it to somebody who then believes that your child is in danger, you're risking your child being taken off you. So how the hell do we reach these men and say, you're sick and you need help, but like, we're here for you, we're going to help you? Because at the moment, and I get it, because obviously I get it, my father, but like the message that they're getting is like, you're a predator, predators are disgusting, there's something wrong with you, shame, 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 shame. And so I'm like, how can we reach those men and be like, okay, you know, this is like, you can stop. Yeah, like,
There's
do
an
you know
option
of
to get
anything
help.
like that?
Yes,
Or
I
like,
do.
can we brainstorm? Or like, yeah, what is there? What is there available?
So in Australia, it's called Stop It Now Australia, and it's an anonymous service. You can phone call or web chat, and you can talk to trained psychologists about your urges and thoughts.
Okay, Stop It Now Australia.
Yeah.
Amazing.
There is also a program based in Western Australia called Safe Care, and Safe Care is a group of for offenders or for people who have urges. It's not anonymous, but the people are very, obviously conscious of privacy, and you can go into that intensive therapy and work on your urges and why you're thinking these things or why you've abused. There's actually offenders in that group that have gone and worked on to, reform and they work within the Safe Care organisation now. So Safe Care is one of the only ones I know in Australia that works with people both in person, web chats. They've got clients from all over the world that come through their Safe Care program. It's all about talking about their urges, talking about what their triggers, safely keeping themselves out of situations like if drinking is one of their triggers and creates that, working on their alcohol addiction if they've got that, whatever it is. And the only reason I know about that is because I went to a symposium in Western Australia last year. Well, I've been to it twice, but last year was the first time I'd actually heard from one of the offenders talk about what he did. And he had been convicted of his offence. He had spent time in jail. He was now on the sex offender register, but he was in the Safe Care program. He had a family. He had a wife. He had kids. He talked about what led him to his offence, and openly right there in the room with us. And it was freaking mighty uncomfortable. I can tell you that now, because
had he been abused as a child?
He didn't allude to that, no. And I mean, look. Everyone, and here's the thing, like, I mean, I'm torn between the belief system that, people who are abused go on to abuse, because I think it's around, and I don't know where I heard this stat, it's only about 5% that go on to abuse, and it depends on the child, it depends on the person. So, for instance, they think that there's an increase in potential abusing in adulthood if a male is abused after 10 years old. So it's more likely after puberty that they will then go on to hurt and harm people down the track. If it's done before puberty, they're more likely to not. And I don't know where I saw that. It might have been in some one of the reviews of the harmful sexualized behaviors research that's going on. So I mean, but, even me, in my experience investigating child sexual abuse, I saw more female offenders at the end of my time. Like, I was starting to see an increase in female offending, or maybe it was an increase in reporting of female offending because they've always been around. Female offenders act very similar, but they're also a lot more sadistic, and there's a lot more, there's a lot more of that narcissistic personality coming out. Like, they're really quite... personality disorders involved and stuff like that.
I think about, I've had a lot of clients with mothers and with female abusers as well, and they do, there's definitely traits. I mean, it's so hard to say again because there was some sadistic torture things as well.
Exactly.
But when I think about my brain just can't comprehend that. Your brain would want you to do that unless there was some intrusive thoughts or some trauma that was driving it. And when I think about the stats and I think that the stats are, 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 5 boys, I think that's a lot of people. And then if you think 1 in 6 men having those sexual thoughts, surely that is those boys. Surely that is...
No, I think, again, we're seeing an increase in that pornography usage. And I think
definitely
potentially, and we're seeing much younger offenders. Once upon a time, and there's so many barriers when you start looking into offender behavior, or you just observe offender behavior. There's so many barriers that they have to get through. Their intrinsic barriers, their beliefs, their fantasies, everything before they offend. But I think if you grow up on pornography and you're growing up on that teen porn and that violent porn, that choking, and that's already sort of grooming you ready to go on to the next thing, which is child abuse or child exploitation material.
Sexual violence, yeah.
And sexual violence. So you're kind of being pre-groomed before you actually get to the adulthood. And then
that's what happens with trauma, though. Like, that's what happens with the trauma, because they're being pre-groomed that behavior is normal and acceptable in their formative years.
True and true.
It's like a debate, but yeah.
And I had a priest once say to me, he was a priest that had offended against multiple children. He'd been doing it for like 50 odd years, and he said in interview, well, I enjoyed it so I knew that they would enjoy it. That was his excuse for abusing. I've had very few people admit to their abuse, like they're abusing. You know, I had one offender who said, I barely count on one hand how many people have actually admitted to their abusing. And one abuser, he completely admitted guilt. He didn't do anything in interview. He didn't, say yes. He just pled guilty straight away. But then he got me back in. He said, look, there's another victim, and told me about another victim who hadn't come forward and said,
wow,
I want to plead guilty for that too. It was almost like he was trying to wipe his conscience clean. I don't think, and again, this is like, I find this interesting, but some people are probably freaked the fuck out right now. We know that there's 3 types of child sex offenders, or so they say. Your predatory offender, which most likely is going to offend against boys. They're the classic sex offenders that we know. When we think about what do you think a pedophile looks like, you're thinking the white dude in the van giving out lollies, or in the trench coat flashing people, right? But that's these predatory behaviours, or these predatory offenders. They've probably grown up. They've probably been abused themselves. They've probably been groomed to abuse. That's my assumptions, but they again go on to offend, and they're not likely to have an actual adult relationship with an adult, because they're not attracted to adults.
Yeah.
Then you get the next level of offender, who is an opportunistic offender. They're the ones who have relationships with adults and then go on and offend against children because they're easy targets. They're perfect victims because they can control them, manipulate them, and they can do whatever they want. But they can have healthy sex lives with their partner and still abuse children. And then you've got the situational offender, who something bad happens, their life implodes, their marriage breaks down, they become addicted to drugs, and then all of a sudden they have a child in their vicinity, and well, that's the easiest person to abuse and harm. It's not just one size fits all. And
no, it's definitely not. And I've heard of all 3 I've worked with clients who have been the victims of those different types of abuse. My dad was definitely opportunistic, but I also think that, and maybe it's just that category, or maybe it's across the board to some degree, but with the priest growing up, he said that he thought he enjoyed it growing up, and so they must have enjoyed it. I think that there is a large portion of people, especially with incest abuse, that believe that sexual abuse is love, that's what love is. I know that my dad was sexually abused, most likely by his own dad, based off of what I know. And I think that there was this feeling, I can definitely feel that abuse was love, that's what love was. And so,
or is it a justification?
Well,
a justification, because deep down they know, but
they know it's wrong, definitely. But if it's happened to them in those formative
years, I loved my parents, so why can't they all love me? I don't know. It's weird because we've got a healthy brain, so we can't think like that.
Yeah, it is. But I definitely, I grew up with the belief that love was abuse, and that love looked abusive and felt abusive. And so I think about it in context, I would obviously never do anything like what he did, but I think about how that can manifest and how that can grow. And yeah, I think my brain just can't comprehend, obviously the porn addictions and things like that add to it, but just how that attraction begins and why that wiring is in their brain. And I think that abuse, the frequency of abuse in children, and the frequency, or the volume of predators, it feels like there's got to be some sort of something that's happened to them to make them that way. I don't think anyone's born that way, and definitely the porn and things like that, but I just can't yeah, my brains just can't connect that, how that could happen outside of those experiences.
And then we've got to not forget that 30 to 50% of child sexual abuse is done by other children. You know,
Exactly.
like, let's talk about that quickly, because we don't want to forget that statistic in that case, because a lot of harm is done by what some parents would say is children being children, and you know, ignoring the fact that any kind of sexualized behavior that is done to another child is actually not children, just kids being kids kind of thing. You know, it's okay if I'm, you know, if my 3-year-old finds their penis and decides to masturbate, well, that's different to then a child who then goes and forces masturbation on another child or asks another child. You know, we need to ensure and instill safe boundaries and body safety rights in our children, so that they don't go, effectively, people can't harm them, trick them into things and do things to them that are unsafe and inappropriate, but also they don't go inadvertently do it to other children, because no one's taught them that's not okay. You know, a lot of people who come forward to me are like, you know, they're trying to reconcile why their brother did it to them, or their sister did it to them, or their neighbor did it to them, even though, and when it's a child doing it to a child, it makes it so much more, make it so much more complex. All abuse is complex, but it can make it so much harder to reconcile. You know, they were just kids when they hurt me so much.
Yeah, because they don't feel like they can fully blame them because they were a child as well, or
But as adults, it's our responsibility to ensure we don't leave kids unsupervised, and we're monitoring what they're doing, and we're not giving them opportunities to, you know, we've educated, we've talked to them, we've given them the language, and we continue to give them the language as they develop.
Yeah. Okay, last question. So if your child was to come to you today and say, I've been sexually abused, how would you respond to that so that your child doesn't retract, shut down, freak out? Like, what, in your opinion, would be the correct way to respond to your child when we've come through with this big thing?
Yeah, so the first thing you would do is tell them, thank you so much for telling me. I am so grateful that you felt safe to tell me about this. Come here, my baby, let me give you a hug. Nothing that's you ever say to me makes me stop loving you. Because I mean, I'd imagine you personally, like when you finally told your mum or told the first person you told, you were petrified of being rejected, right? Petrified of them telling you that it was your fault or that you were in the wrong. So you need to first reassure your child that they have done the right thing, however that looks to you, but tell them that you love them. Thank you for telling me. You're so brave and amazing for speaking out, because that took a lot of courage for that child to say that to you. And, you know, just take a deep breath and give it a moment, hug them, you know, sit with them. And then, you know, when they're ready, you know, hey, what do you need next from me? You know, do you want to talk about it more? Or do you want me to just hold you and hug you and keep telling you how amazing you are? Because really it's about reminding them that it's not their fault. That might be the next thing you say. Hey, you did nothing you're telling me now is your fault. You did nothing wrong. And, you know, and constantly just check in with them. What do you need now? Do you want to keep talking about it, or do you want to do something? I mean, it's not for them to know what happens next. It's for them to be in that moment just reminded that they've done the right thing and that you are so proud of them and that you love them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what should you absolutely not do for all the mums that are emotionally reactive?
Fuck, oh my gosh. So my daughter told me about that she accidentally saw porn. She didn't accidentally, she Googled sex because she was having her, here's a tip, when your child starts doing their sex education at school, don't let them go Google.
Yeah.
She'd just done sex education at school and she Googled sex, and of course what first comes up? Porn. So my daughter saw porn. So when she came to me on that same day, because she was petrified of what she saw, but she felt safe enough to come and talk to me, she was like, Mum, can you sit down? And I was like, oh. And in my head, I was like, oh, fuck. My kid's been sexually abused. Like, oh, my God. Like, I was panicking inside. Believe me. Okay, here's a tip. Even experts in this space freak out with their own kids.
Yeah.
When it's someone else's kid, no worry. You can keep calm, cool, collected. But in my case, I was like, but I was trying to keep a straight face. First tip, try and keep a straight face. Second tip, if you need a moment, say, hey, Bob, what you're telling me is really important and I really want to listen, but I just need to go to the toilet, and then you've got my full attention. Go and freak out in the toilet, come back in a few minutes, go and like scream into your freaking hand towel or whatever you've got to do, hope silently, but you really need to keep a straight face. You need to keep your emotions in check, and you need to, don't ever say, are you sure? Or don't ever say that. Please don't. Imagine, okay, so if you're a parent listening, and I don't ever want you to go through this, but imagine if you were telling someone the most difficult thing you've ever told them and they said, are you sure? It's pretty fucking shit to hear, if you know what I mean. So, are you sure? I don't think that's right. You know, don't tell lies. You know, you could get someone in trouble here. Like, you just go, you know, kids won't tell us, you know, if how we react to the small stuff depends on whether our kids trust us with the big stuff. If we're reacting really, like if we say things every time they tell us something, are you sure? Or they're not going to trust us with a big thing, because we're basically reminding them that we don't trust them and we don't believe them. You know, only 1 in 3 adults believe a child when they tell them they've been sexually abused in Australia. So, you know, it's our job to believe our kids and to listen to them. Yeah, okay, in the moment, your job is to just tell them, thank you so much for telling me, you're so brave, I love you, nothing you can tell me could ever make me stop loving you, because their abuser could be sitting in the background having poisoned their brain, thinking that no one's ever going to believe them, no one's ever going to love them, and that if you tell, you'll get taken away and you'll never see your parent again, your safe parent again. So, you know, that they'll harm them, like in your case. So it's really important that we don't perpetuate those thoughts, because as children, we don't know. We only believe what our parents or our adults around us tell us. They're the safe, or they're the people, they're the adults, as we get told, you know, I'm an adult, you need to listen to me. I'm an adult, I know best. So if they've told you and they've stepped outside of their comfort and told you, we need to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I'm definitely was really preparing for the release of the book and for the questions that are going to come at us. And we've got an FAQ page and we've got all these things answered in text, but I think it's just really different as well when someone can hear it and see you, and it just lands more. So I really appreciate you coming on. It's a massive part of our mission. So
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And, you know, it requires all of us. There's never enough child abuse prevention educators. There's not enough books in the world. The fact that it's still happening, it means that we haven't done enough. There's enough space in this whole world for all of us to be doing every little part we can. And every conversation we can have just creates a ripple effect and hopefully eventually a tsunami of protection.
Absolutely. I love that. Tsunami of protection. Well, thank you again, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you.